Today, we're going to talk about music sample clearance and what every musician needs to know. If you're not clearing your samples, you could be putting your music at risk. Let's talk about it.
Arkatech Beatz.
What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? It's the Arkatech Beatz Music Business Podcast. It's your host, Platinum Producers, Arkatech Beatz. I'm Juggernaut.
I'm Mike Trauma D.
And together we make the super duper platinum group. Producers, Arkatech Beatz. If it's your first time to the platform, welcome. Every week we get together and we talk about different music business subjects. It's the Arkatech Beatz Music Business Podcast. It's real and uncut. But we talk about different music subjects, really to help artists and producers and independent artists, just to really kind of make sure that they can find ways to navigate this music business and really try to help folks really just understand what's going on in these streets in terms of, you know, how to navigate through this crazy business. So today we wanted to talk about clearing your music as far as samples, sample clearances, and what every musician needs to know. We're going to talk about, you know, what you need to do. What is a sample clearance? If you're not clearing your samples, what's the ramifications? Because it can have very, very large implications for your music. So we want to make sure that we're talking on all those topics. So what I want to do first is tell you what will happen to you if you don't clear your samples. We're going to start there. Like if you don't clear your samples, this is what you're in danger of, and let's go from there, and then we'll go backwards.
So, Jug, I saw a couple people online like scrambling. Yo, what happened to my favorite artists? What happened to this record? It's gone. It's not on any streaming platform. It's gone. And word was that there was a sample issue, you know. So sample clearance, if you have a record that has a sampling and it's not clear, you know, it could be pulled down from all streaming platforms. It could be pulled down from everywhere, you know, and yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow if your record is building any type of momentum. You know, you got your campaign ready, you put out a record, and then you put it out, and then it's pulled down, you know, right in the beginning of your campaign. You know, pulled down, you sent cease and desist letters, and even in some cases, lawyers are hitting you up on some, you know, lawsuit pending. You know, these things can happen. You know, it could be a tough situation, and if you're an independent artist or a producer, and you're hit with this, it could be pretty scary if you especially don't have that type of money to kind of represent yourself in those legal situations.
And the main thing that people have to be clear on when we're talking about samples and sample clearances is you're taking a sample of someone else's copyrighted material. Like, for those who may not understand it in totality, I take a sample of someone else's song, someone else's lyrics, someone else's melodies. I take some of that and then I incorporate it into my new work, and I try to make the record off of someone else's intellectual property that may be copyrighted and owned by someone else. So whenever you do that, that is called sampling. So I want to define that, make sure people know what that definition is. We're taking somebody else's work, we're incorporating into our work. But in order for you to incorporate someone else's work into your work, you need permission. And if you don't have the permission of it, that's why you have all of the situations that Mike just said, where you have the takedown, you might get sued, you might get fined. It's like there's a whole list of things that can happen to you in your music. And not even talking about destroying your reputation as a musician and or artist or producer. You don't want to be the producer whose music didn't get cleared or never gets cleared.
Yeah.
Right. So that creates a lot of the situation. So the main thing that we have to look at is like there are severe ramifications for folks who do not want to clear their samples. So we want to make sure that everyone is clear of how severe it is if you don't do it.
Yeah,
So
there's even artists who do not want you using any piece of their record.
right.
So in some cases, it's like you got to stay away from it, period. Or they will come for you and they will throw the book at you.
So now remember, we have to break down now who owns the sample, right? When we talk about the sample has to be broken down into two parts. We're talking about the music composition, and then we're talking about the master recording rights. When we talk about the master recording rights, that may be owned by the label. The music composition may be owned by the artist and or song publisher, and you need clearance from both.
Right.
If you're not familiar with that situation, like you have to basically get the permission from the label. The label has to say that you're good for the master recording.
Right.
That's the sound recording itself. And then you have to now the musical composition, which is the actual melody and the lyrics and all of that, that is actually the music composition, which is basically owned by the music publishers.
Right.
And then now you have to get permission for that as well.
Right.
So it can be a little bit of a task. There are some companies that you can go through to help you kind of get through that situation if you have the writer's information and the label information to help it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk about that in terms of how to obtain a sample clearance. But we could kind of also talk about our own experience in terms of us sampling records, and some of the we've been on both ends of the spectrum. We've been on that spectrum where we've sampled artists that basically told us, "Get the hell out of here. You can't use our shit." And
look,
we've had other artists that have like praised us and taken us to dinner for using their samples because their music wasn't generating any income. Right? So it's just there's two levels to this, right? So I guess let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about the first issue when we wasn't clearing these samples and how bad that almost played out for us.
Man, Jug, it's like this, man. Hip hop, man. It's like that's the thing, man. We folks sample. I mean, we folks been doing this since the beginning, the break beat, taking the drum loops, sampling and making records out of pieces here and there, putting stuff together, reconstructing samples and loops. So the whole sampling culture, man, is like ingrained in hip hop. So for folks that may not understand or want to put their face down on some, you sampling has been part of this hip hop thing since the beginning of its creation. So let's say that first and foremost, So during our journey, we sampled the records, and the key was always to find the obscure sample, find things that everybody else either don't have access to. That's what sets you apart from the other producers. Just finding something that nobody else got. That was part of the hype, the adrenaline. I found this. Nobody heard this. I got it. What is this? And other producers tried to pinpoint, where'd you get that from? I'm telling you, you gotta figure that out. You gotta.
That's a secret.
That was the joy in the hip hop, producer community. It was kind of a fun. I got this. You didn't get it, but where did you get that from? Oh man, and it was just an exciting thing when it comes to being creative. And sometimes you would find things from artists from all over the globe, and at the same time you're being exposed to new kinds of music.
Right.
It opens you up to different sounds and different things you may not have heard if you didn't go digging and looking and getting so familiar with other artists and other kinds of music. But then you also have to be careful, because then you could find records and use them, and the original owners, the original copyright or publishers or the artists, whoever's owning it, may not be hip to what they not they may not be they may not like what you're doing to their record. You know, they may not like that you took a piece of their record and created this new thing. You know, some artists are very, close with their music and it's personal for them. And they may not feel comfortable with you using their music.
Let's be clear. Back then, them folks hated rap music, and they didn't want no parts of it. Let's just put it. Let's just say what it really is. They didn't like rap music. They didn't like hip hop. They didn't want their music to be incorporated with hip hop. So I'm gonna start calling out names a little bit. But go ahead.
So we sampled a couple of artists, a couple of world artists, and we put them on a couple of Raekwon records, to be specific, which was actually the original Immobilarity, the one that you did not hear.
And I did hear. And I think people need to realize that there is two different Immobularities.
Right.
There's the Immobilarity that was completed before sample clearance.
Right.
And then there's an Immobilarity that happened after sample clearance.
Absolutely.
The Immobilarity before sample clearance was a totally different album.
Yeah. There was some records on there that was really much more aggressive, music-wise, much more aggressive than what's out now. But bottom line, the samples couldn't clear a good portion, about a fourth of the album.
Yeah.
A quarter of the album could not clear because of sample clearance. And it was like, oh man, it's a shock. It's disappointing when you be creating a great piece of work that could possibly change your life. And then the sample owners are like, nah. They didn't want any money. They didn't want this or that. They just didn't want it being used at all. So it got denied, couldn't use it, had to go back to the drawing board. Now,
and let's, before you go any further with that, because let's talk about how deflating that shit was. Like how, as a producer, and I want to put this out there to all our producers out there that listen to our joint. Like, these are the records that would change a person's life. Like, you know that, and I know that, right?
Right.
And this was prior to, you being able to exploit stuff via mixtape and,
right, kind
of finagle your way around it and still get the benefit of using it without having to clear it. So this was before all of those times, and like it was so like debilitating to feel like, man, they're never gonna hear this record. They're never gonna hear this record the way it's constructed.
Yeah,
like they're not gonna hear how Ray hit this joint with the story on it, with the sound effects in it and everything. They're not gonna hear this vampire bats. They're not gonna hear this.
Yeah, man, that's
like it was like a punch to the gut. Like when I think about those times, like, man, like those records weren't gonna come out. There was crazy joints, man. Like they were so crazy. Some of these joints, like people would have thought that he was gonna walk on water with some of these records.
Yeah, and it's sad that there's so many records just in general like that. Especially during that time, there was so many jewels, that you won't be heard. And yeah, you can say, there's a way around it in some cases. If you replay some of the music, you may be able to get around like just the master part of it, and you will only have to go and get clearance from the actual publishers. But sometimes the replay ain't as good as the original. There's just certain things on a replay you may not be able to actually, to duplicate.
We tried it, man, and it was
especially in that time when sounds, especially software, wasn't as robust as it is now. It's not as powerful as it is now. So finding like certain orchestra instruments, or even getting somebody to come in to play it. It was a hell of a task.
That was so crazy. Like, so so when we talk about it, like, it's like you gotta make sure that. And so after that experience, we started to be very, very conscious about where we got our samples from,
Right.
because that was an experience that was not a good experience. Granted, it still kind of segued us into our production deal and also into our, working with Nas. But all of that happened based off of the album that was supposed to come out
Right.
versus the album that essentially did come out. So, just stuff for people to realize, like, listen, like, you have to be very, very mindful of where you're sampling. It can really throw a monkey wrench into your whole situation, like, in a heartbeat, and the way stuff is now with Content ID, like, you can't really escape.
Yeah.
Like, if you have somebody else's work inside of there, and if it's not cleared, or if it's not, you don't have the right licenses, or if you don't really, chop it up a certain type of way, if you don't pitch it a certain type of way, I'm not really telling you how to I'm not telling you how to beat the samples. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying, in a nutshell, if you don't manipulate it in the right way and they come for you, you can be liable for whatever it earned too. Don't sleep. It depends on what people want to come and take from you. So
Mm. Wow.
it's really a situation. And then we had another situation with a sample that we had a record that we should have cleared but didn't clear it. The record was out,
Mhm.
unauthorized. We should have cleared the record, didn't clear the record, and then the unauthorized party beat us to clearing the record, and then
Right.
took some of the leverage from us.
Right.
Um,
Negotiation. Yeah.
in terms of the negotiation,
Right.
because what happens is, because we didn't clear the sample, we basically gave away some of our basically some of our ownership of the rights for that master.
Yeah. So,
And it,
when we're telling you, when we're giving you these lessons, and we come on here, we telling you from personal experience.
yeah, it's real. It's real. 'Cause that could have been a very, very, that could have been a much, 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 much larger settlement. Because, so let's break it down. I don't want to be talking in too much code, but we had a record, artist took it, put the record out, record was sort of like a hit, right? And
Mhm.
they never they never did any paperwork with us.
Right.
Right? Never did any paperwork with us. So basically, in the producer world, we owned all those rights because we never relinquished it. We never gave them a contract that would have had to work for hire. So anytime you're doing a producer agreement, will have language that says, hey, you're a work for hire. You're basically going to be relinquishing your rights. You're relinquishing the master, and they'll be able to exploit it in perpetuity. And then you're trading your master for a royalty, pretty much. That's the name of the game. So because they failed to do that, um, we still own the master, but the record had a sample in it. And the way for us to have been able to own that master outright
All the way.
all the way,
Mm-hmm.
we needed to clear the sample.
It's clear to say that as independent, as an
Yeah.
independent company.
Yep. And had we had done that, when we finally went back and we tried to negotiate the settlement of the record for being released, we would have had more leverage, because then we would have had everything outright. We'd have had all our stuff in the ducks in a row. And, you know, we didn't clear the sample because, you know, how do I say this? We didn't clear the sample. It's not that we didn't say that we should have cleared the sample, but we were advised that it wasn't, we shouldn't have had to pay for the sample, but that was under the old way of doing music. That was under the old way of being a work for hire.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were looking more from a label ownership level, that wasn't taken into consideration during our negotiation situation, and I think that was what was very key, was trying to make sure that the people that we were being represented by was clear on what our position was in terms of, hey, we wanted to basically attack this as the rights owners
Right.
and as the label, and not just as the producers and songwriters.
Right.
And
But I think
that was,
that's where things get a lot of real tricky. And if you're an independent producer, you know, you need to attack these contracts, these agreements, as a record label owner versus just a producer. Because if you're going in as a producer, you're only going to be limited to a certain portion. You're going to be treated a certain way.
yeah,
But if you're coming as a record label, a company that owns uh,
the master,
the
the
master,
master recording. Yep.
then the negotiation is totally different. And this is something that we've learned, and you know, we're passing it on to you guys. Like every independent producer, like it doesn't matter how big or small you are. If you're the producer, you know, you make your company. When you go into these deals, you go into it as the company. You go into it as not as just a producer, but you're negotiating on behalf of your company.
Yep. And that's the difference here. And I think a lot of our producers are not really aware of that. Like, and you have to put the lawyers on task too, to let them know, like, listen, I'm the producer, but I'm also the owner of the master.
Right.
We're the owners of the master. This is our business entity. They want to make a deal with this business entity for this master.
Right.
You know, and that's the difference. Like if you're like you said, if you're treated like a producer, you're going to be relegated to that old antiquated,
Right.
you know,
And you're not going to be given, you're not going to be given the respect either. They're not going to treat you the same way. They're not going to respond the same way. They're going to just treat you as a producer. And unfortunately, I hate to say it like it's a bad thing, like it's a curse, but in some instances in this music business, the people who are cutting the checks, the people who are at the top, you know, the lawyers, the people who are making these deals, you know, they're looking at a lot of our producers like, you know, they say,
go into the totem pole.
yeah, there's a lack of respect for producers. So you have to change that tone when you step into the negotiations and step into that. This is the company. The company owns this song. The producer is under the company.
Right.
You know, so if you want to deal with anything music related from this producer, you have to deal with the company, and you have to treat it like that. And it has to, the wording has to reflect that in your paperwork.
And so in that instance, that was one of our real eye-opening situations when dealing with samples. Like very eye-opening, that you really could have, you know, you X yourself out of the ownership side, because had we had cleared the sample, we would have had, you know, full own, would have been the rights owners of that particular master.
Right.
In totality, you know. So it's a game that you have to learn how to play if you're going to use samples. If you're going to clear your samples, you know, you want to basically own the rights of your samples. And also you have to look at it in a situation like this. There may be a situation where people might want to sample your music. And that has happened to us as well, where people want to sample your music and then they have to clear it with you. So you have different situations where you know, you definitely want to be clear on what you can do and what you can't do with regards to samples. So I want to just talk about a little bit of just some of the alternatives of sample clearances. I think we kind of touched on a little bit with the replays. While it works sometimes, you know, a lot of the times we sample because the sample has a certain feel to it, and the replays or the re-recording of these things sometimes don't really break through. But let's talk about that just a little bit, and, you know, that being an alternative to clearing a sample.
Yeah, I mean, when you sample, man, you find something, you hear something, you feel something, and you loop it up in a way that, you know, speaks to you, you know, and when you're creating a record and you're using a sample, you're finding something at that moment. You're bottling something at a specific time, and it gives you a certain feel. And that is not always easy to replicate. You know, yeah, we could replay a record or replay a sample, but it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always give you that feel, and it may or may not work. But if you happen to do a replay, then you will most of the times you won't have to clear the master because you're not using the master recording.
Right.
But you would have to clear it with the publisher. So whoever owns the publishing of that record, you still have to clear it. And when it comes to clearance, they could charge you anything. They could charge you thousands of dollars, or they could charge you for a limited time, or how many you sell, then you have to come back to the table. So when it comes to sample clearance, you still have to negotiate, and there's different ways that they can come to you and say, okay, we'll clear the sample, but we need this, we need that, we need this percent, we need this amount of money up front. You know, X amount of years, you may have to come back. X amount of records sold, you may have to come back. It could be a limited time. So there's different ways that can be done. You have to just make sure that you're reading the fine print, as they say.
Yes, I remember that particularly for, again, with that same project with Raekwon, there was one person that cleared that he cleared samples for us, and he had a stipulation that he needed, I can't remember the dollar amount, but remember he had a situation where he had to keep getting paid for every, I guess what, 500,000 records?
Something like that.
So he had a situation where it was every 500,000 records he was supposed to get in advance. Right? And then he came in for 25% of the record.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then he got writer's credit on the record because he sampled the record.
Right.
And I remember him coming to New York because he was signed to Sony as an alternative artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when he reached out to us and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in New York. I want to meet you guys." Right? Because at that point the record was a #1 rap record.
Right.
So it was his first single. He had the #1 rap record in the country, and he said basically, "This is my #1 Billboard record. I never had one before."
Wow.
He was ecstatic behind that, and
now I think about it like, okay.
Yeah, he was ecstatic behind that. And then we said, "Hey," he was like, you can sample my whole catalog, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did. We went back and sampled him for Nas.
Oh, man.
Like that was, once you get a catalog up, once you get an artist that lets you clear the sample, the smart thing is to double and triple down, because you know what they're going to ask for, you know what they're going to want, and develop a relationship with that particular artist and that label, and then and keep sampling. Hopefully they got a whole lot of stuff in the vault. He had invited us out to his ranch in Arizona or somewhere, and he was like, "Hey man, we'll build them. Like if you need them, I got them." I was like, "Man, we should have took up on that offer, boy, because he had some heat."
But yeah, sample clearance.
Yeah, that was he had something different. The pianos and those flutes, and he had some bangers back then.
But yeah, that was the era, But as far as sample clearance, you have to do your due diligence, man. And now, especially where there's a lot of sample clearance being done online, a lot of sampling, you have to really make sure you read the fine print. You really got to make sure to find out if the samples are, free to use. Do you have to clear them royalty free? Like, we get bombarded every day with these emails, these DMs, these ads, all these things showcasing samples or royalty free or this and that. And you really have to, check out each one and make sure that it truly is royalty free, because There's some instances and there's some things that are platforms that I ran across where everything wasn't royalty free as they were saying it was. You have to scroll down and going through it, and each project or each pack is different by a different producer with different rules. And I did find one that said that you have to clear the samples, that you need clearance from them. If you want to use their material, you got to rightfully so clear the sample. And that could mean that they can charge you whatever they want to charge you to clear it. And that could be a tough situation if you're already pretty much in negotiations for the record with a major. An artist comes in, wants to use your beat, already probably recorded it, let you come to the studio and hear it, or you played it in the studio and he recorded it right there in the spot. They want to put it out. Now you got to clear the sample, and the sample owner is giving you a hard time, or wants to charge you like crazy, or wants half of the record, or wants to cut you out.
Wants 100% of the record.
It could be
that happens too.
It could be a nightmare. It could ruin your relationship with the artist, and it could ruin your relationship with the record label, and further opportunities. So you really need to check out when you're online and you're looking for samples. You really got to do your due diligence and search and make sure that you are really clear to use these records. And if you don't know how to clear them, you need to contact the publisher. You contact the publisher, and you got to get it in writing, and have an attorney look over it to make sure that you're not going to be duped out of future revenue.
Real talk.
Because, man, I see a lot of packs online, a lot of packs on different platforms, and everybody's saying this, everybody's saying that, but when you look in the fine print, you're like,
So we're talking about sample clearance in this episode, folks. So far we've answered the question. We've also talked about the alternate sample clearance, and then we've also talked about the consequences of not clearing the sample. So what we hope for is that you've taken some of what we're talking about on this, and make sure that you're clearing these samples. I want to pivot a little bit though, because while we're talking about samples and dealing with people's catalogs and so forth and so on, we see a lot of catalogs getting purchased and bought up in the last few months. In the last few years, rather, where people's catalogs are being purchased. And part of the producer community, Metro Boomin, has just recently basically sold a portion of his catalog to a company called Shamrock Capital. And they're saying that his publishing catalog basically nearly for $70 million.
Nice.
Definitely congratulations to him on that. That's a big amount of money. But I wanted to talk about, this particular deal and kind of making a delineation between producers who are basically selling online and producers who are getting their music placed, and basically kind of giving people the understanding that, listen, if you're a music producer that's online, the potential for these type of deals are not really there for you per se, because there isn't a quote unquote way for them to really look at your ongoing revenue stream in the way that they want to see it, because this is really relegated to people's music who's published and out with music labels. So I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a big difference. For those type of deals, you would have to have, records with usually major artists,
yeah,
and from on major record labels, and they've been released. That's the gist of it. You gotta have a catalog of major releases, and these companies will see that and say, okay, this guy's been producing for X amount of years, and he's got a bunch of major releases. They're all bangers, hits, is bringing in this amount of money. And what they'll do is they'll predict how much revenue will these records bring in over a course of time. And they may come to you and make an offer and say, hey, you know what? You're going to make this amount of money. We're going to give you this up front right now. And as a producer, instead of waiting the years and years for that money to come in, you could get it all in lump up front. And then, you could take that and use to invest in other things and other opportunities, and get into other things like real estate or whatever. And this is not financial advice, you know. So it's a thing right now, but it's only available for those who's putting out catalog with major artists, major labels, and is actually are receiving a lot of streams and
music publishing income, and I think that has to be delineated. Like, you have to realize that as a online music producer, right, you do sell licenses in terms of beat leases, so forth and so on, right? And what you're hoping for is that one of those records that you've leased out a license hit big, and then start to create this type of publishing income, right? It happens, but it doesn't happen as often as people would like it to be. I think the difference here, again, like you said, is like you have to. I think it's best for producers to play both ends of the spectrum. Is to have some products for the online community, and then also make sure that you're still looking to get major placements, major things, because as you can see, that those can be very lucrative if you have a very hefty catalog.
Absolutely.
Like, that's really the reality of the situation. But, again, when we're looking at all of these, it looks like this company was the one that bought Taylor Swift's 6 albums.
Oh, wow.
They said basically they've raised almost $600 million in commitments. So, we keep talking about this, and we keep talking about the fact that these companies are acquiring these catalogs. And what we continue to see is like a lot of venture capitalists or a lot of private equity. They're buying this music, people. And what I wait for it to happen next is I'm waiting for Congress to basically change the royalty structure. I think that's what happens next.
Wow.
I think all of your buddies buy the catalog first.
And
then
buy for low.
Buy for low. Go in, get the rules changed.
And then once they own it, then the royalty rate changes maybe at a higher rate.
At a higher rate.
And then these companies have either their own streaming platforms, or they partnered with other companies that can exploit these masters.
This is the game, folks, from the inside out. So, to his credit, he only saw a little portion.
Okay.
And then he's also still relatively young. So I expect him to continue to do what he does for a long time. So I do see him making, a lot more music. I don't see him slowing down anytime soon. What was interesting is that this particular firm was founded in 1978 by the late Roy E. Disney. Right. So Shamrock has transitioned into institutionally backed private equity firm. So you can see where some of that music is going to wind up landing, maybe somewhere, in your favorite Marvel movie or something like that. Like this is the game, folks. Folks are buying these catalogs because they know the cost that it costs to license these things in music and film, like in TV and film rather. So the way that you cut that cost is to buy it in bulk, and then you have the access to exploit it.
So producers
on the back end.
So producers really, really need to work on catalog.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like right now, I think producers need to work on being an artist. And what I mean by that is putting out your own projects and work on building a catalog. When you go to any of these streaming platforms and, you search your name, you should see a bunch of projects, a bunch of albums underneath your name, and that's a good indication of what your catalog is. You know, you have to build catalog. You can't just have your beat sitting in a hard drive somewhere. It's not, you gotta, you gotta make it work for you. It's like, it's money. It's literally money. You gotta make it, but you gotta make it work for you. It does no good sitting in your hard drive. So my advice to all producers is to take about 10 to 15 beats and,
Release.
put it out.
Yep.
Volume one, volume two, whatever, we've done it. You could look, you could go on any streaming service and search Arkatech Beats, and you'll see that we've done it. And by doing this, you're also not only creating awareness for your music, but you're building catalog and you're creating new opportunities. You're reaching places with your music that you may not have access to before. Somebody's going to hear this and say, "Hey, I want to use that. Can I license that beat? Can I do something with it?"
Yep.
And you could create new opportunities based on that. Like it's endless, actually, the possibilities. Not to mention if any of those records, happen to go viral and those beats go viral, and it's everywhere, streaming everywhere on different media platforms. You could receive a pretty penny.
It's different now because we're talking about so many different platforms and so many ways to go viral. It really behooves a lot of producers to put stuff out. Like you can no longer hold your content.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that. Like you have to really look to monetize every single piece of your content, every piece of music that you might own. You have to start thinking bigger. Like, yeah, you might be looking for it to be placed in songs, but look for it to be placed everywhere in terms of like commercials, in terms of TV, in terms of sync. You have to think, everywhere. You just can't think in the old box of, oh, I got to just get a rapper or, I just have to get somebody to sing on it. Like it's so much bigger than that now. Like what's really also happening is that you have an explosion of podcasts. You have an explosion of video content creators that need music. Like that's the reality of what's happening is that people need music for their video content. The video content is eclipsing every other, content that's being created, and it all needs to have a bedrock of music. So if you're not putting your songs out there, you're basically, cutting into your ability to monetize yourself.
And how are you being discovered if you're not putting your music out? I mean, you would figure it's basic 101. How are you being discovered if you're not putting out any music or putting out enough music?
We've said this ad nauseum. Like we've been saying this, like we've been saying it, and if you're not listening, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't even think your music I don't think your music could even go viral unless it's actually on one of those platforms. Because in order to, for example, like TikTok, when you're creating the content and you want to search the music, it pulls from a lot of these
DSPs.
right.
Yep.
It pulls the music from, so you're cutting yourself out if you're not adding to your catalog, if you're not researching sample clearance to make sure that what you're putting out is not going to hurt you. And you're going to be limiting yourself if you're not clearing your samples and not putting stuff out. So just to kind of wrap things all together, sample clearance is a major thing that you have to make sure that you're knowledgeable about when you're making records, because it can hurt you if you're not. And for those who don't even use samples and those who are, 100% original, cool, but you have to make sure you protect your work because it could bite you on the other end.
Yeah.
Somebody use your stuff, samples from you. So you have to, make sure you got the right protection in place. And then, you got to make sure you get that record out there. Build that catalog. You see what's happening, these deals are happening.
These
These
deals are
opportunities are
happening,
happening.
man. Too many deals is happening. People are getting money, man. Like it's something to really pay attention to. And I think a lot of folks are not paying attention to it. Like they get caught up in their box and they're like, I'm good. Yeah, you're good for right now. Like this thing evolves and it evolves very quickly. We've been around long enough for you to see how long it evolves. We went from having CDs to Napster, from Napster to MP3s, from MP3s to Apple to iPods, from iPods to streaming.
Yeah.
Like we watch it all. Like, so we could just tell you that technology will continue to evolve. Do not think that these people are acquiring these catalogs for no reason. Something is coming. Keep saying that. These videos are going to age very, very well because technology is coming, and once it comes out, I think we're seeing an advent of more AI video platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna need music.
Yeah.
That's if the AI doesn't create all the music.
Well, what they're gonna do is they're gonna take all the masters that are owned, and they're gonna recreate and use that as the template to make multiple masters, different masters.
From the AI.
Yeah.
I feel that that's where it's going. I feel that the music is basically going to be used to feed AI. That's what I think is happening. It's to feed that creativity. I think that's what's happening. But
one of the things, because
one of the things
with technology is just it could go really anywhere. But one thing you do know that it is going to continue to move forward, and you want to make sure that you're positioned properly forever how they may go, and having catalog, having ownership, having catalog, having your own is crucial in order for you to make any major moves in this game.
And we're going to talk more about that. I think as we start to progress a little bit more into the year, more about protection of your music. We really want to make sure that you understand that our platform is for you to improve your music. So we want to help you we want to help artists and producers to improve their music, to protect their music, and to monetize their music. So if there's the things that you really want to know what we're trying to accomplish with this platform, that's really what we're trying to accomplish. So, we want to tell you the tips and the tricks to get your music to sound better, to develop as an artist, to develop as a producer. We want to
as a business person. As a business person.
That's crucial. And that's when we go talk about protecting your music. Right now, we want to show you how to do things as a business person, how to protect your music, and then how to monetize it again as a business person and not just as an artist. For the long haul, and making sure that you can earn off of your art. So that's really the crux of this platform.
Yeah, and we use our experiences to also kind of just bring it on home to really let you guys know that we're talking from like real experience. Like, we've caught a few L's coming up.
A lot of L's because there was no one to help.
And I nobody to help.
That's another thing too. It's like there was no one to help. No one helped us.
Yeah.
Like that was really the real reason behind this all right now is that I remember how it felt like trying to make it into a business that no one wanted to help us.
Right. Nobody wanted to tell you the rules. Nobody wanted to tell you how it would go. Or some people give you half the information, and you're like, man, like we trying to grow this thing. We trying to be a part of this thing and try to help put into it, and to get misinformation, to get no information. It was frustrating.
Run around. You couldn't even pay your way in.
Right.
Like that was even the worst thing about it. Like you couldn't even pay your way in. People didn't, you could have had, hit records and people just didn't want to break bread with you. And that's just the nature of this business. And
we were figuring things out on the fly.
Yeah. And I think we've taken the position that, hey, once we got into a position, we would give some hand ups versus handouts. And, that's what we're doing. All right. So it's the Arkatech Beatz Music Business Podcast, folks. If you haven't already gotten our ebook, The Songwriter's Guide to Song Registration, The Essential Steps to Protect and Monetize Your Music, It is out now. You can get it from our website. It is a free download. You definitely need to make sure that you're taking care of that. It'll tell you what you need to do to protect your music and to monetize it at the same time. At least the essential steps. Of course, there's more, but I didn't want to make, we didn't want to make it into a super long and, complex read, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
But for the most part,
New Beatz.
New Beatz is coming up. New Beatz is up. We're offering that. And then also there's going to be some new offers with our production in terms of some more artist feedback, some more artist development. We're going to start offering that as well. So just trying to help get artists to where they need to be. Some more opportunities, because we know opportunities are very slim in this game. And we're trying to make sure that we can have those opportunities and provide them across the board. If you're not following us, follow us at everything at Arkatech Beatz. Any parting words for the folks today?
Nah, I think we said it all, man. Subscribe, man.
Subscribe, right? Subscribe, follow us, subscribe. We appreciate everybody that's rocking with us. It's building a small army a day at a time. But until next time, folks, peace.
Peace.
Arkatech Beatz.